Let's go ahead and head back over to Revelation chapter 13 and make our way through. Let's look at verse number 12. It says, and he, remember, this is the land beast, the apostate, the unbelieving Jews. He exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Something that may be a little confusing just grammatically here. Let me make sure that is clear. You can look at the Greek if you want to on this, but I'll just kind of tell you what this is talking about in verse number 12. It could properly be read, and he, that's the unbelieving Jews, the beast, exerciseth all the power of the first beast, that's Rome. And when it says it exercises the power of the first beast before him, that means in his presence. It doesn't mean like the day before. It means in their presence. Before him means like in their presence. And that's what we're reading in the book of Acts. They are exercising the power of Rome, but it only matters if Rome sees it. Rome has to see it. And so they are, like we said, they're tattletelling on the Christians that are not following the Roman laws. That's what's happening here. And then it says, whose deadly wound was healed. That's a reference back to something we've already studied. Let's go ahead and read verses. Well, let's go ahead and go to Acts chapter 12 and read verses 1 through 3.
Now, about that time, Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church, and he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread.
So this is all political. This is all political reasons. You notice it says in that passage that when he saw that it pleased the Jews, these Jews were trying to cause the Roman officials to act in a certain way. And that's really what we're getting across here. Let's go ahead and read verses 13 and 14 together in Revelation. And he, that's the land beast, doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. So this is the idea of apostate Israel is trying to do these mighty acts in front of Rome and encouraging everybody they possibly can to fall in line and worship this idea of the Roman Empire can take over this region and to fall in line with this. This is exactly what Jesus talked about in Matthew 24:24. So let's go ahead and read that as a reminder, even though we've already done a lot of work in Matthew 24. But Matthew 24:24.
For there shall arise false Christ and false prophets, and shall shew great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect.
So this is what's happening. They're trying to do they're trying to do the very best they can, folks, to look like a lamb. They're doing all they can. They already look like a lamb. They've got a lot going for them. The biggest tell, though, for them is that they speak like a dragon. They're saying the things of Satan. They're doing the bidding of Satan, even though the physical characteristics of apostate Jews look just like Jesus. But we can tell them apart because of what they're doing. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verses 9 and 10.
Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved.
So here we have in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, which is, by the way, one of the most misunderstood passages that I've heard for futurists that they constantly talk about, because in here it talks about a temple. Well, folks, got to tell you, there's a temple standing at the time of Paul's writing. He could point over and say that temple right there. And this is a primary place where people teach about a third temple theology. The problem with that teaching is there's a temple standing when Paul wrote it, just like there is when Revelation was written. There's a temple standing. So when we're talking about the temple, who would ever be a primary audience, a contemporary audience, would hear about a temple that's standing and say the temple, and they go, oh yeah, they can look up and go, oh, that temple right there. How would they ever say, you know what I bet this is talking about? This is probably talking about not that temple, because that's probably going to get destroyed. And then if this is talking about a temple, it's probably a remade temple in the future in thousands of years. You would never, never, never come to that conclusion from just reading this. The only way that people have that thought when they read 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 is somebody told them to think that. The original audience would never, never, never do that when there's a temple standing at the time of the writing. So this is another clear and obvious thing. In verses 9 and 10, 2 Thessalonians 2 is the same exact thing we're talking about. These are saying, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan. That's the land beast. Their working is after the working of Satan, with lying lips, with powers and signs and all deceivableness and unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth that they might be saved. They look like the lamb. They do miracles in the same way a lamb would do miracles, but the problem is they speak like a dragon. That's the problem. The problem is they love Satan. They're not in covenant. And so this is exactly what Paul is Paul is saying exactly what we're reading about in Revelation 13. This is a commentary on Revelation 13. Jude is a commentary on Revelation. 2 Peter's a commentary on Revelation. I mean, these are clearly the same exact events. Somebody would have to teach you that they're different. But first century readers would have a problem with this. Let's go to Revelation chapter 13 again and continue in verses 15 through 17.
And we think we're the smartest people ever have lived so far.
It takes a lot. Well, the thing is, it takes a lot of work to bridge 2,000 years of culture and this kind of thing. So we're having to do some heavy lifting, because this would have been very natural for the first century readers. They didn't have the hangups that we have.
Right.
We have to unlearn just to go back to the basics. And in that sense, we're doing a lot of heavy lifting. But yeah, if we could just simply say, and this is in our first video we ever did, you and I, how would the first original immediate audience have understood this? Now, we don't know everything they knew, but we can at least try and attempt to put ourselves in the position of the recipients of this letter to say, how would they have understood this? Certainly, a third temple theology would not jump off the page to them.
Right.
Verses 15 through 17 says this: and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell and save he that had the mark of, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. So obviously, super popular verses here. A lot of ink has been spilled trying to guess what this is. A lot of hours on YouTube has been spent trying to figure out the mark of the beast. Folks, it's just not that complicated if you use the Bible. What we're talking about here in verse number 15, you can read this very plainly in verse 15. This is mimicking the words that we have in Genesis chapter 2, when we're talking about God breathing life into Adam and making a creation. Rome was the little puppet, so they thought. Apostate Jews were making Rome like their creation. They are becoming God, and they are using Rome, they thought, to use to get to the top of the world. And that's the same imagery that we're seeing used here in verse number 15, that they believe they had the power to give life onto the image of the beast. Adam was made in the image of God. God breathed his breath into Adam's nostrils, and Adam became a living being. He became a living soul. It became a soul. And so here we see that they are mimicking that creation here, but they're the ones now breathing life into Rome. And then they told everybody, you better worship this image, the image of the beast. And so this idea of image, you can actually learn more about this if you want to go. And I'm just going to do this on the fly real quickly, Jimmy. In the book of Hebrews, let me just look at Hebrews chapter 1 real quick, because this is all imitation. This is all imitation. In Hebrews chapter 1, we read this, that it speaks of Jesus in verse number 3. who being the brightness of his glory, that means that Jesus is the illumination of the glory of God the Father, who being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person. So Jesus is the express image of the glory of God. And we see that Adam is made in the image of God. He's an image bearer of God, but Jesus is made in the express image of God. Jesus is the real deal. Adam is a picture of it. And so here we see in Revelation chapter 13 that the Jews, knowing this type of creation and power, they're trying to breathe life into the beast that's coming up from the sea, which is the Roman Empire. And here it says that they are causing all to basically worship the beast or they'll be killed. That means to identify with. Now brings us to verse 16, and this very, very simple. Folks, if you've not heard this teaching before, you'll walk away very encouraged. We're going to use just Bible here and make a very simple observation. And he, that's the land beast, causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark. Now, the word mark in the Bible just simply means that you're identified with and that somebody owns you. Let's look at a couple of examples of this. In Genesis chapter 4, verse 15, Jimmy, if you have that up, Genesis 4:15.
And the Lord said unto him, Therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him.
So there's a mark on Cain. So we get the biblical idea or definition of mark. This is God placing a mark on him that he would be protected, that somebody can't take vengeance on him, that God himself would take vengeance on Cain. Cain was worried that somebody would kill him. And so God put a mark on him and said, this one is for me to deal with. That's the general idea of mark. We get another idea of mark in Ezekiel chapter 9, verses 4 through 6. Jimmy, if we could turn there, Ezekiel 9, 4 through 6. This is the imagery of God going to destroy Jerusalem in Ezekiel chapter 9. And before he goes and destroys Jerusalem, he's identifying people who are grieving the sinfulness of Israel and that are in covenant with him. And he puts a mark on their forehead. Let's go ahead and read that.
And the Lord said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. And to the others he said in mine hearing, Go ye after him through the city, and smite. Let not your eye spare, neither have ye pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house.
So in this passage, we see the mark is a good thing. The mark here is God marking with this inkhorn. You can go back and read the whole passage. And he's saying, whoever has the mark, it's kind of like reminiscent of the Passover. Whoever has the mark on them, the judgment will not be given to them. So the mark here shows ownership. It's very, very simple in the Bible. The concept of a mark shows ownership, and that leaves us to where the location of the mark is at. How do you identify with the beast? Well, it says here in verse number 16 that you receive this mark in your right hand or your forehead. This is also, again, biblical imagery. We are not biblical imagery. We are not guessing what this is. A right-handed or forehead suggestion is right from Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verses 6 through 8. Jimmy, if you don't mind reading that.
And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes.
So what he's saying here is very simple. He's saying, God is saying to Israel, I want you to obey me at your house. I want you to think about me when you're going for a walk. When you're going down the road with your children, I want you to strike up a conversation and talk about me. When you're doing work in the yard, I want you to be thinking about me. I want a relationship with you. And the way that he says this to them is, this is like binding these words on your right hand or between your eyes on your forehead. Right hand in the Bible is a place of activity or action. So when you're doing an action or you're doing a deed, you're doing a work, I want you to be thinking about me. Right hand, the place of power. When you're plowing the field, think about me. Okay. But also, I don't want you just to dedicate just your deeds to me. I want your mind to be on me as well. I want it to be between your eyes. I want it to be on your forehead. So all that we're talking about with right hand is deeds and forehead is actions. You're identifying with God through your deeds and your actions. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Your deeds and your actions, your right hand and your forehead. The mark that God wanted Israel to have was that he wanted them to be identified with him in the way that they acted and the way that they thought. And so here, the mark, the ownership of the beast of Rome is seen in your right hand or forehead. Your deeds and your actions. Your life will line up with the Roman Empire, with the prodding from apostate Israel. That's all that the mark of the beast is. It's that you have given into the system of the Roman Empire being authoritative in your life, and you will match that up with your thoughts and your actions. And if you do this, Jimmy, you'll be protected by the beast. You'll be able to do a lot of things. You can be in the marketplace. You can buy and sell. You're part of our society, our lovely, lovely utopia, all powered by the dragon. And this land beast, this harlot, is going to ride the sea beast, and all are being worshipful towards the dragon. So this idea of the mark of the beast is very, very simple in the Bible. It has the idea of ownership. It's saying, let Rome own you, and you need to prove that out in your thoughts and your actions towards Rome. In other words, be dedicated to Rome, and all will be well. That's all we're talking about here. This has nothing to do with a vaccine, has nothing to do with Social Security, has nothing to do with a barcode, has nothing to do with vaccines or Bill Gates or Barack Obama. This has to do with the first century identification with Rome, that you could be a part of their system and you'll show yourself worthy by both your thoughts and your deeds and dedication to the beast.
So it's not like those movies I grew up on, A Distant Thunder, The Beast.
Yeah.
There were three that I watched.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the one with the helicopter killer bee one.
Yeah.
We all get ready. What is it? Two men down and up a hill.
I wish we'd all been ready.
I wish we'd. That's what it is. I knew it'd come to us. So I wish we'd all been ready.
We used to have everybody come to the church, and we'd set up a projector and screen and watch those movies.
Yeah. If you watch that one, which by the way, I think it might be on Amazon Prime. Last I checked, a couple years ago. But if you watch that one, I don't think it's called All Been Ready or Wish We'd All Been Ready. That's the song that's in it.
It may be the first one was called A Distant Thunder.
Okay.
The movie was, and then one of them was The Beast. And there was another one.
Somebody watching will put it in the comments for us. We can't think of it. But if you watch that though, Jimmy, you'll find a lot of the stuff we've talked about in that movie. You'll find the things that we have said in absurdum, like the locusts. So it shows one of the scenes in that is that one of the Bible teachers is reading Revelation and he talks about the locust, and somebody says, well, what do you think those locusts are? And the guy kind of leans back on the beach and he looks up at the sky, and the camera does a really bad fade. It's so cheesy from the 70s, but it does a really bad fade. It goes from a locust and it shows a helicopter, and the helicopter then takes off, because that's actually their teaching. They think all of the symbolism is going to be modern warfare. Of course, now the 1970 movies are out of date. They'd have to say an F-22 or something like that. But
the other one was called
it's crazy.
The other one's
Thief
called
in the Night.
Thief in the Night. Yep.
I just remembered it. Yeah, you just came in my head. But so anyways, the mark of the beast is no more difficult than finding the word mark in the Bible, finding the word beast in the Bible, and finding right hand and forehead. Just put the author here is bridging the gap of common knowledge that the first century reader would have had with the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
A good teacher takes you from where you are to where they want you to go. He's taking them from the knowledge they had and adding the revelation of Jesus Christ, the revealing of Christ.
Mm.
That's what this is about. It's building on the bedrock of what they've already heard in the old covenant and saying what difference Christ made in this situation. That's all we're doing here.
Mm.
And we're also building on the imagery of Leviathan. Leviathan is the sea beast. And then we also talk about this idea of this behemoth that is a land beast. Both of those are seen in the book of Job. So we're kind of drawing on familiar, like we talked about the elephant and the donkey. This is familiar satire. This is familiar imagery that we're building on a land beast and a sea beast. And now they're taking on characteristics. No harder than that.
Not to sidetrack you, but
Sure.
almost everybody in the English speaking world would call that behemoth. And I saw a guy teaching not that long ago on this passage, and he called it behemoth or something like that.
Behemoth.
I don't know if that's more accurate, but everybody would say behemoth.
Behemoth, yeah.
Yeah.
When you get into these Hebrew words that are transliterated, and you could, I would say the majority of our English versions of them probably are off because we're really just trying to say Hebrew words. And like, for example, when we say Hades, everybody knows what we're talking about, but it's Hadass. We talk about they worshipped Baal, it's Baal.
Yeah.
Sounds like you have a hiccup. Baal.
Yeah.
So who knows? Like technically speaking, the Tower of Babel is the Tower of Babel, but I don't say that because I would think I was wrong with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last verse 18. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 600 threescore and 6. I'll just say this about this. I think we did talk about this when we were doing the dating of Revelation. But let me just say a couple of obvious things. First, most obvious thing, the biggest thing I want to get across, that is, I'm the most comfortable saying, biblically speaking, whatever this means, John expected his readers to know exactly who this was. Basically, you have a numbering system. The number is not 666. The number is 666. Because the reason I'm saying that is because if you let somebody change this to 666, then all you have to do is find the number 6 somewhere in the world, and then you find a second 6 and you find a third one, and you can have a theory. No, it's not 3 individual 6s. The number here is 666. So something adds to that one number. It's one number, not 3. And so it's important because there's so much bad teaching out there, and they find the number 6 somewhere. I just got to find 2 more, and now we have the mark. We have the mark of the beast, the number. So here's the idea: this one number, that's 666, reveals to the contemporary reader who we're talking about. Now, notice it says, "Here's wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number." That's another way for our author John, revealed by the angel. It's a way of them to wink. It's kind of like, for him who has ears to hear, let him hear. If you have understanding,
maybe they didn't want the Romans to understand what they were saying if they got a hold of this text.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So if the Romans were reading this, this would mean nothing to them. Now, especially because we're reading it in Greek. This doesn't translate in Greek. But here's the thing, Jimmy. We've talked about this on our dating of Revelation. I don't know 100% who this is talking about. I think it's Nero. And here's something interesting. Nero, at the time of this writing, was in charge. Nero didn't die until 69 AD 69, as he killed himself. And that was the year of the four emperors, the civil war going on in Rome. But Revelation is written before that because it all starts in AD 66. So Nero is the one that's on the throne right now. If you take Nero Caesar in Hebrew, see, every Hebrew letter has a corresponding number. So and also a picture, but we won't get into that. But this is called gematria. And Nero Caesar does add up to 666, 666. The numerical value of Nero Caesar is 666. So is that who it's talking about? I think so.
Yeah, I do too.
But this is what I do know without even guessing about anything, because we're doing a Bible study. Here's what I do know. John, writing this in the first century, expected his readers who were Jewish to know who he was talking about. In other words, they did not decode this and say, who's Barack Obama? Or like I've heard before, Ronald, 6 letters, Wilson, 6 letters, Reagan, 6 letters, Ronald Wilson Reagan, 666. That's not what we're doing here. The first century readers would never have thought that. That's not how gematria works, and they don't know who that is. But also notice here, it says here, Jimmy, here's wisdom, let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast. It's the number of a beast. It says, for it is the number of a man. So the number of a beast is the number of a man. Now, if the beast we're talking about the beast being the Roman Empire, just like Nebuchadnezzar was identified as a beast, he was also the king of Babylon. So here we have kind of in and out using terminology of a beast being the head of the Roman Empire, also identified as a man being Nero. And we could if you go watch our video on the dating of Revelation, we go into this much, much more on there. With this idea of 666, Jimmy, there's only one other place in the whole Bible that we see this number 666, I should be saying. And that is that 1 Kings chapter 10 describes Solomon. Remember Solomon, who, in a lot of ways, whose name means peace, Shalom, Solomon. He starts off like a lamb, and he ends up like a beast. So he's like a lamb-like figure that ends up like a beast. Hopefully he comes to the Lord in humility towards the end of his life. But we see that he becomes richer and more powerful. He receives, remember, these 666 talents of gold to kind of bolster his desire to become richer and more powerful. He wants to impress those who come to see him, like, remember, the Queen of Sheba. And it's 666 is this exact number. It's the only other place used in the Bible. So he's puffed up with pride to receive gold. It's very interesting that that's the other place that was used in a leader that starts off like a lamb and ends up like a beast. So this is the defining characteristic that we see of this number 666. It's those that are out of covenant with God, and they're actively campaigning against God. It's the number of both man, it's the number of beast. So really, it's the Trinity of Trinities we have here. And ironically, it all adds up to, in the Hebrew, it does spell out Nero Caesar. So very, very fascinating there. But yeah, that's the whole idea. You got to identify with Nero. You got to worship him. If you identify with him in thoughts and deeds, then you're good. You can buy and sell. And if not, then you're one of those Christians that we are going to ride the beast and try to destroy you by the power of the dragon. And we're gonna wage war on you because you're the enemy. You followers of Christ can have no place in this, have no bearing in this place in the first century. That's the idea of Revelation 13.
If you like this video, hit that like and subscribe button, and check out the full episode by clicking the link below.